Hey, Gen 10-9 here. So, deer season's over and you're thinking maybe I should get a deer call, or maybe you're not having too much success with the deer call you already have. Well, let's talk about that for a second. Stick around and I'll be back in just a few moments. Hey, thanks for sticking around. This is Gen 10-9, where we give common sense advice for real life hunting and fishing situations for your average sportsman. And today we're talking about deer calls and how to use them. So there's something we need to establish before we start talking about what makes a good deer call and how to effectively use one. And it is this: deer are generally very quiet animals. They don't vocalize a lot. So in that sense, you can't use your deer call like it's a turkey call, a coyote call, or a duck call. Deer just don't vocalize in the manner of those animals. If you use your calls in that manner, you're scaring away more deer than you realize. So that's something you just have to keep in mind. So in order to talk about how to effectively use your deer call, I want to tell you a little story that happened to me when I was first learning how to use a deer call. It was when I was just getting into bow hunting. I was living in Iowa, and deer calls seemed to be a new thing hitting the market, and everybody was talking about them, and so I bought one. And I was really afraid to use one in the bow stand. I just didn't know how to use them, and I didn't know when to use them. So when my hunt was over in the morning, I got down out of my stand, and I did like I normally did when I was bow hunting. A lot of times I would walk around the property and try to get a sense of which way the deer were moving, had their patterns changed. And it was late in the morning, and I was walking on the edge of the woods in a small cow pasture, and so I thought, well, this is a good time to just take a rest and try to figure out what this deer call sounds like and how to use it. So I sat down on a log next to a wild rose bush. So I wasn't in cover because I was actually in a cow pasture, but I had cover near me. So I pulled out my deer call, and I was really kind of nervous about how to use one. I just didn't know what to do. So I pulled it out and I started making noises. And I'd make them really light. I tried hard not to be heard. And then the call I had was kind of adjustable, so I would lengthen the tube, and I can actually take it out and move a ring, and it would make the call either sound lighter or deeper. And so I, tried to mess around with this deer call for about 5 minutes, just trying to get a sense of what does this deer call sound like. And so I just, and then I would, so, just trying to figure out how to use a deer call. Well, I look up, and I was in this pasture, and just inside the woods was a dry creek bed. And there was a 5-point, 4-point, 6-point buck in the middle of the creek bed coming into me. And so I didn't know what to do, but I thought, oh my goodness, here comes a small buck. So I grunted to him, and he zeroed in right on me and came up out of this creek bed and crested right into the edge of the pasture. And I was just amazed because, wow, I'd called in this deer, but then I realized I'm not going to be able to shoot this deer. I'm completely busted. I am sitting on a log in a cow pasture, and I brought this deer into me. And he saw me. When he crested that little creek bank, he locked right on me, and I was busted. So I was pretty content with the idea of just calling in a deer, and he was looking at me, and then in a split second, he looked off to the left. And it was at that point, every muscle in his body tensed. And I thought, that's strange. And sure enough, in comes this big 8-pointer, and I'm sure the 8-pointer thought he was looking for a doe in the area, but this 8-pointer came right in, rushing right in, and drove this 5-pointer completely off the property. I mean, he looked like a horse, a quarter horse in a race coming after that 5-pointer, and they both just passed right by my eyes. And so that buck was clearly irritated that there was another buck in his area. So I learned a really valuable lesson about deer calling that day. I had called in 2 bucks not even knowing what I was doing. But the one thing I was doing, which is really important in how to effectively use a deer call, is this: quiet is better than loud. Now, sometimes you'll watch these deer call commercials and you'll see guys in deer stands and they're acting like they're playing a trumpet and they're just out there blaring their deer call. And they're making really funny sounds, and they're trying to be as loud as possible. Well, after 30 years of bow hunting, I can tell you with certain confidence that quiet is always better than loud. Because generally speaking, deer are not loud. Remember what I said earlier. Deer do not vocalize often. And when they do, they're not vocalizing like turkeys or ducks or coyotes. They're generally vocalizing in very subdued tones. So when you see some guy on a YouTube video or commercial using his call like it's a trumpet, in high pressure hunting situations, that's not going to work. Deer are very quiet animals and they're very cautious animals. And they don't vocalize loudly and alert everybody, every predator in the area where their location is. That is just not how high pressure deer function. Now, some people may be shooting video on trophy ranches or a very exclusive property where they get no hunting pressure, and they may be using their deer calls with loud blaring noises. And if they can get deer on video to sell their product, that's great. But if you're hunting on state land, or if you're hunting in high pressured areas like I hunt, I'm hunting here now on about a 50-acre piece of land surrounded by private property that has a lot of deer stands. The deer I'm hunting on this property are high pressured deer. You're not going to attract a lot of deer blaring out your deer call as if it was a turkey call or a duck call. Because generally speaking, high pressure deer are very quiet deer. And that's something you got to remember as to when you're trying to figure out how to effectively use your deer call. So a second rule of thumb to remember is this: less is better than more. And what I mean by that is this: say you're in your blind and the woods are really still and you're not seeing any deer and you're not even getting a sense that there's a lot of movement going on, and you want to try to attract a deer and you pull out your call. Well, the best rule of thumb is this: to just give a few short bursts. Yep. Maybe one other call. And then stop and let the woods settle again. Because generally speaking, deer are not walking around the woods calling to one another. Remember, they're not like a turkey or a gobbler, which walks through the woods declaring his need to breed and trying to look for hens and trying to call hens to himself. Deer don't function that way. Generally speaking, a deer will vocalize when they either see another deer or smell another deer, or when they're fooled into thinking another deer is close by. And you could do that by using a call and effectively using deer sense. And before I forget, it's important that while you're using your deer call, you use it in a combination with quality deer sense. So don't run to Walmart and buy some bottle of deer urine that's been sitting on the shelf for years. Do yourself a favor and go on the internet and try to find quality deer sense, because that can be an effective tool that makes your deer call even more effective. So keep that in mind. You always want to try to use deer calls in conjunction with quality deer sense. But back to the point. Less is always better than more, because when you call, deer are not like dogs. You can get your dog whistle or you call your dog and your dog comes running into you and so excited to see you. Deer are not like that. A lot of times it takes a deer a little time to figure out, did I just hear a deer and that deer is over there? Can I smell the deer? How can I go find this deer that was calling to me? One of the things you got to keep in mind is deer are not predators. They're prey animal. And prey animals have to be very cautious about their movement in the woods. Now, in North America, deer don't have many animals that prey on adult deer. Maybe fawns have to worry about bobcats and coyotes here in the Midwest. We don't have wolves, we don't have bears, we don't have apex predators. So, but that doesn't change the DNA makeup of a deer. They are prey animals, not predators. And so they instinctively want to be cautious about what they do. So if you use your deer call, use it about 3 times, then stop and be still and watch what happens around the woods. Because generally speaking, it takes time for deer to think about, I just heard a deer, I wonder what deer that is, I need to go see, or do I need even want to go see what that deer is doing? Deer, not like dogs, they don't come rushing in. They're very cautious about their movement. And sometimes, it's a while before they decide, yeah, I think I want to go try to find that deer I just heard. So keep that in mind. Less is always better than more when effectively using a deer call. So earlier I mentioned that you probably should use your deer grunt or your deer call in conjunction with quality scents. And there's a very simple reason why. A mature deer, whether it's a doe or a buck, when you grunt, a lot of times they're going to try to use the wind in their favor to locate exactly where you're at. And so if you got the wind in your favor, the wind's blowing in your face and the deer's in front of you, a lot of times that deer will circle around because they can't see you because you're up in a tree and you're not on the ground. They'll circle around and catch your wind in order to locate exactly where you're at, and then they'll come right into you. Well, if you don't have quality deer scent downwind of you, a lot of times when that deer comes around and cuts your scent, they're done with you. So it's important that, like when I bow hunt, I try to triangle scent, quality deer scent around me. I put one in front of me where I really would prefer the deer to be when I shoot, and I put one behind each quarter, so that if I use my call and a deer comes in from behind me and they smell the deer scent, they don't catch my wind, then they got their senses fooled and their hearing fooled into thinking there's a deer in my location. That is a really effective way to deer hunt, especially when you're bow hunting. Not so much when you're gun hunting, because when you're gun hunting, you could shoot a deer 100 yards away. They don't even know you're in the county. But when you're bow hunting and you really need that deer to come in about 25 yards, if you don't have some scent tabs quartering away from you, downwind of you, a lot of times a mature deer will go to the trouble of cutting around behind you to scent check you in order to know whether they're going to come in and find you or not. So it's really important that you try to learn how to use effective quality deer scents in combination with your buck call or your deer call, and that way you can have greater success when using a deer call, because that's a really effective way to use a deer call, using a deer call in conjunction with quality deer scent. So what's the bottom line with respect to a good deer call and how to effectively use it? Well, the first is this: a good deer call sounds like a young pig. That's what a lot of deer sound like. The second is quiet is always better than loud. The third is less is always better than more. And maybe most importantly, the last is this: to effectively use a deer call, it should be used in combination with quality deer scent. The combination of quality deer scent with a quality deer call is a deadly combination and really raises your chances for a successful hunt. So with that in mind, thus endeth the lesson. I hope you liked the video. Hit like if you appreciated the video. And may the Lord richly bless you with the buck of a lifetime next fall. Again, thanks for watching, and God bless.